Athens once believed it was the wisest city in the world. Until one man began asking questions.
He owned no school. He wrote no books.
Yet powerful men feared him.
Not because he claimed to know the truth,
but because he exposed how little others knew. This is not the story of a philosopher.
it is the story of a question that refused to die.
Okay, so get this. Here's a guy who never wrote a single word down, but his ideas, they basically defined all of Western philosophy. He was told he was the wisest man alive, and his only weapon was a question. And for that, just for asking questions, his own city, the very birthplace of democracy, sentenced him to death. So yeah, today we're diving into the story of Socrates and the absolute paradox of his execution. All right, let's set the scene. The year is 399 BCE. We're in Athens. But, this isn't the Athens you might be picturing, that glorious, super confident city from the legends. Nope. This is an Athens that's been haunted by defeat. It's just reeling from decades of brutal war and complete political chaos. And this is where we get to the central mystery of the whole story. I mean, how could Athens, the place that invented democracy, the cradle of free speech, how could they turn around, put their most brilliant thinker on trial, and actually sentence him to die? It just doesn't make sense, right? See, Socrates wasn't a traitor. He wasn't a murderer. His crime? It was literally just asking too many questions. But in a city that's fragile, a city that was desperate for someone to blame, that was enough. It was a death penalty offense. So who was this guy? Who was this man so dangerous that his own people wanted him dead? Okay, so let's dig into the man himself. Because Socrates, well, he was a total walking contradiction. Seriously. He was known all over Athens for two things: his absolutely incredible mind and, well, for being incredibly ugly. Physically, let's be real, Socrates was pretty much the opposite of the Greek ideal. Ancient sources describe him with this snub nose, kind of like a pig's, bulging eyes, a potbelly, and he was always wandering around barefoot in the same raggedy old cloak. But on the inside, his character was extraordinary. He was a decorated war hero, famous for his courage and just legendary self-control. And somehow, despite his looks, he could hold a whole crowd completely captivated with nothing but his word. And look, this reputation he had for being wise, it wasn't just local gossip. It gets better. His friend actually went to the oracle at Delphi, which was, like, the most sacred and important religious site in the entire Greek world, and asked if anyone was wiser than Socrates. The answer that came back from the gods? No one. Now, this news supposedly shocked Socrates more than anybody else. Why? Because he was convinced he knew absolutely nothing. And so this divine announcement kicked off his lifelong mission to figure out what on earth the oracle could have meant. And this right here brings us to his most famous idea. His conclusion was this: the oracle must be right, because at least he was aware of his own ignorance, unlike everyone else who walked around thinking they knew everything. For Socrates, saying "I know nothing" wasn't some kind of failure. It was the absolute foundation of wisdom. Real wisdom, true knowledge, starts the moment you admit you don't have all the answers. So, how did he go about testing this theory? Well, he developed a tool, a special method of conversation that was so powerful. It could either build up knowledge or just completely tear down someone's entire worldview. It was, in a way, a weapon, and it was forged from nothing more than simple questions. Today, we call it the Socratic method. The Greeks called it the elenchus, and what it is really is a form of relentless cross-examination. Socrates wouldn't stand there and give you a lecture, no way. He would just ask you questions, one after another, each one designed to poke holes in your logic and expose any contradictions in what you thought you knew. Here, let me give you a classic example of how this worked, straight from one of Plato's dialogues. Socrates bumps into this guy Euthyphro and asks him, "Hey, what is piety? What does it mean to be holy?" Euthyphro, super confident, says, "Oh, that's easy. Piety is whatever the gods love." So Socrates pushes a little. "Okay, but don't the gods disagree and fight all the time?" Euthyphro has to admit, "Yeah, they do." "Well then," Socrates says, doesn't that mean the very same action could be loved by some gods and hated by others, making it both pious and impious at the same time? And boom. In just a couple of questions, Euthyphro's certainty completely falls apart. His ignorance is laid bare for everyone to see. Now just imagine this happening day in and day out, right in the middle of the public square. And his targets? We're talking generals, politicians, famous artists, the big shots. And while all the young people thought this was great entertainment, watching their elders get totally backed into an intellectual corner, well, you can bet the powerful men being questioned did not see it as a fun little debate. For them, it was public humiliation, and they never forgot it. Okay, so it's pretty clear Socrates was making some powerful enemies. But, that alone doesn't usually get you a death sentence. To really understand how things got so serious, we have to look at the political situation in Athens back then, which was, let's just say, incredibly fragile. So, to really get the kind of danger Socrates was in, you have to understand what Athens was going through. The city had just lost this absolutely devastating war against Sparta. Right after that, a brutal regime known as the 30 Tyrants took over. And guess what? Their leader was a guy who used to hang out with Socrates. So by the time democracy was restored, Athens was just paranoid. The whole city was on a knife's edge, super suspicious of anyone who seemed different, anyone who might be critical of democracy. So the case against Socrates really had two layers. On paper, the official charges were religious, things like impiety, not believing in the city's gods, and corrupting the youth. But what was really going on underneath all that was political. People remembered his connection to traitors. They saw him as a critic of democracy, a kind of social troublemaker whose teachings were making young people question everything, including the state itself. So did Socrates back down at his trial? Did he apologize? Not a chance. Instead of begging for his life, he basically doubled down. He told the jury he wasn't a threat. He was a gift from the gods to Athens. He called himself a gadfly, like a horsefly, sent to sting the big, lazy horse of the state, to keep it awake and moving, to stop it from falling into this comfortable, unthinking slumber. He wasn't just annoying people, he argued. He was performing a sacred duty. And you know what's crazy? Even with that defiant defense, the verdict was incredibly close. The jury was made up of 501 of his fellow Athenians, and they found him guilty, but only by about 60 votes. Think about that. If just 30 guys had voted the other way, he would have been acquitted. He would have walked free. This just goes to show this wasn't some landslide decision. Athens was completely torn about what to do with him. But what really sealed his fate, the final nail in the coffin, came during sentencing. He was given the chance to propose his own punishment instead of death. He could have suggested exile, and he probably would have gotten it. But instead, Socrates responds with pure, uncut sarcasm. He says that for all the good he's done for the city, he should be rewarded with free meals for life at the state's expense. That was an honor they gave to, Olympic heroes. This joke, this incredible act of defiance, absolutely enraged the jury. And when they voted again, this time they voted for death by a much bigger margin. So Socrates lost the trial. But in the end, by dying the way he did, he created a legacy that would long outlive the very democracy that sentenced him to death. So while he was in prison waiting for his execution, his rich friends came up with a solid escape plan. They were ready to get him out. But Socrates refused. He basically said, look, I've lived my entire life benefiting from the laws of Athens. If I run away now, I'd be breaking my social contract with the city. He truly believed it was better to suffer an injustice than to commit one. So he stayed, and he chose to drink the poison hemlock. And this idea, the unexamined life is not worth living, that really gets to the heart of his entire philosophy. He was convinced that a life lived on autopilot, a life where you never stop to question your own beliefs, your own values, well, that kind of life just isn't worth it. For Socrates, the whole point of being human was to think, to question, and most importantly, to examine yourself. His death instantly turned him into a martyr for free thought. His student, Plato, made sure his ideas would never be forgotten by writing them all down. It's through Plato that the Socratic method helped lay the groundwork for everything from formal logic to the scientific method. Entire schools of philosophy, like Stoicism, were built on his ideas about virtue. He became this timeless symbol for integrity and the pursuit of truth, no matter the cost. In the end, Socrates didn't die for an answer. He died for the question. He died for the right to ask it. And he left all of us with a huge responsibility, the duty to think for ourselves. So I'll leave you with the same challenge he's been giving us for thousands of years. What is one belief you hold that's worth taking a closer look at?
Thank you for listening. If questions interest you more than answers, stay. There are many more to explore.